I thought this was going to be a big deal, right? You know the joke, why did the chicken cross the road? Well, he didn't because he was too much of a chicken. Hello, I'm Lawrence and I'm on a quest to uncover all of the memos that Britain and America lost in the pond, and one of those memos pertains to things I thought were going to be a big deal before I moved to America but turned out not to be. Turns out that brevity wasn't one of those things. But before moving to the United States, or indeed any country, you sort of paint a picture right here, not literally, that'd be really messy, of what that country is like. Whether you've seen something in the movies or read rumours in the newspapers or fell for the lies of somebody called Chad on AOL Instant Messenger in 1998, that picture that you painted up here goes from being a Bob Ross to a Grant Wood. I have no idea what that means. But how can we believe the stories that we hear about the United States of America? Well, there's only one way to find out, and that's to move there. I did that in 2008, and while I was excited to move to America, there were certain things that I was worried about that in hindsight made me look really stupid. And so if you're British or from another country entirely and you're thinking of moving to the United States once it's safe to do so, then this video is for you and also for Americans that want to laugh at me. And so without further ado, here are 4 things that I figured would be a much bigger deal once I moved to America. Tornadoes, yes, you might be thinking, what's this doing on your list, Lawrence? I mean, you yourself have talked before about how prevalent tornadoes are in the United States, and it's true, no country on earth gets more F5 tornadoes than the United States. Indeed, I remember it being a relatively frequent occurrence back home that on BBC News you'd often see footage of big tornado outbreaks in the United States and the devastation it left before it to people's homes and livelihoods. This, coupled with films like Twister and that really strong documentary in which a huge tornado results in the death of a witch, I'd built up this image of a tornado free-for-all. When it became clear to me that I was going to be living in the United States for a while, and particularly here in the Midwest, I just assumed that I'd see a tornado something like every 3 years, you know, more than I see my own family. This is sounding really apocalyptic. And do you know how many tornadoes I've seen? 0, and I've been here 13 years. I've just realised that's an unlucky number, meaning that 2021 will be the year. Now, it's a simple fact that you will see more tornadoes if you move to the Great Plains. There are people watching this who have encountered several tornadoes in their lifetime. But if for whatever crazy reason tornadoes just aren't your thing, then some places are better to live than others. Now, while I haven't personally witnessed a tornado firsthand, I've twice had to take shelter amid a tornado warning, once in Indiana and once in this very building. And in many ways, that's just as terrifying because it's the fear of the unknown, right? Think of Jaws, except instead of a shark that you can't see, it's a tornado. And instead of the resourceful Chief Brody, you are a British man in the fetal position. Apart from that, my fear of being swept up and finding myself in a field a mile away with some equally disoriented cows hasn't yet come to fruition. But while I'm on the subject of fields, that brings us on to this. Growing up in Britain, I was and am a big fan of football, or what the Americans would call soccer. And back in the day, I could have played for Manchester United in England if it wasn't for, you know, reality. And while I've never cared about the football versus soccer debate, I did have genuine concerns that America it doesn't care about this sport I call football. And that's fine, you've got your own sports, I understand that, even if I can't say the same about the rules. But my biggest fear with that is that I wouldn't be able to find anywhere to have a kickabout, that goalposts wouldn't exist. You know, that I'd have to make one out of anything or anyone that I could find. My wife wasn't up to it. And it turns out she didn't need to be, because the United States actually has soccer fields wherever you look. That's an exaggeration, you won't find them in libraries. And my initial fears that I would never play soccer again weren't realised. I mean, they were, but only because I ate too much pizza. And why is this? Well, there's a big interest in soccer at the collegiate level, an interest that seems to largely diminish by the time people are done with education, kind of like marching band. And now, from first world problems that never materialised to those of the natural world. In Britain, when it comes to nature, nothing is really that extreme. There are no F5 tornadoes, there are no earthquakes over 8 on the Richter scale. And the country isn't known for terrifying creatures, except for Noel Edmonds. And so because of this, it was always at the back of my mind that if I were to visit somewhere like Australia or the United States, I better watch out for spiders that have a little bit of red on them, not to be a hypocrite. And just like everybody else that was 9 years old in 1990, I was obsessed with the film Arachnophobia. In this film, a huge number of deadly spiders take over this American town, and it's up to Jeff Daniels from Dumb and Dumber to save the day. And here's the thing, even after watching that film, I'm not arachnophobic. I like spiders. But given the choice, I'd prefer to remain socially distanced from, a black widow, a brown recluse, or that stupid thing at the end of Stephen King's It. But when I moved to the United States, I genuinely found myself accepting that this was about to become my reality. That every summer I'd have to do my utmost to avoid the shed. I had visions of going into my drawer and not knowing that a sneaky black widow was concealing itself in my underpants. But thankfully, this isn't quite how it turned out because again, after 13 years of living here, I've not encountered a black widow, a brown recluse, or a hobo, and that's not me being derogatory, that is a genuine spider. Now, as with tornadoes, there are Americans watching this thinking, oh, Lawrence, you should come to my neck of the woods if you want to see a deadly spider. I don't! But it is true that brown recluses, for example, are more common in the South. So if you live there, let me know in the comments below if you've ever encountered one and whether or not your trousers became equally brown. And so we've had violent weather, dangerous if misunderstood arachnids. What can possibly top that, you're thinking? And it probably doesn't come anywhere near close to what you're thinking. A jaywalking infraction. It perhaps says so much about the small role that it's played in my life here that I've discussed it so little on my channel. But let's go back in time to when I was a wee little boy of 25. Back then, I'd visited the United States a couple of times, but I had absolutely no idea what jaywalking was. It was a word that cropped up occasionally in films, but I just assumed it was a sport. And then in 2007, 1 year before I moved to the United States, I remember there was this news story coming out of America of a British historian who was wrestled to the ground by several police officers who had warned him against jaywalking. And it was at this moment that I realized that jaywalking meant to cross the road at a non-designated area. And the news back home was making this huge thing out of it. If you go to the United States, don't jaywalk or you'll never come back. And it all seemed really extreme because back in Britain, we don't have the concept of jaywalking. So long as you look both ways to make sure there's no traffic coming, you can cross a road regardless of whether or not there's a zebra crossing or a crosswalk. I thought this was going to be a big deal, right? The joke, why did the chicken cross the road? Well, he didn't because he was too much of a chicken. At least that was the case at first, and after my wife had laughed at me 17 times, I started to get the impression that I might be overthinking this. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not an active jaywalker. As everyone should, I follow the rules of the road. Those rules do vary by state, so next time you're feeling paranoid, Google is your friend. But in all of the years that I've lived here, I don't think I've ever heard anybody say, ooh, did you see Ashley? I think she was jaywalking, better call the cops. It's low on the list of offences is what I'm saying, and it's definitely not a sport. That's it for this episode. Let me know in the comments below how stupid I was, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel so that my videos don't get lost in the pond. Today, a big shout out to all of my patrons who make these videos possible. If you would like to become a patron of Lost in the Pond, you can do so at patreon.com/lostinthepond. Until the next video, goodbye.